2. The story of the fall of King Harold has long stood as one of the most dramatic turning points in English history. For centuries, it's been told as a tale of exhaustion, bad luck, and inevitable defeat. Harold's army, worn down by a grueling march, arrived at Hastings too depleted to withstand William the Conqueror. But recent research is challenging that long-accepted version of events, reshaping our understanding of this famous battle. At the heart of this reinterpretation is the work of Tom Lyson, a professor of medieval history and literature. By revisiting primary sources, especially the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Lyson proposed a striking alternative. Harold's army may not have marched hundreds of miles across England before facing William at all. Instead, they likely traveled a significant portion of that journey by sea. This shift in interpretation carries enormous implications. It challenges the idea that Harold's defeat was inevitable. It suggests the outcome of 1066 may have been far more uncertain, a matter of strategy, timing, and chance. 2. The conventional account of 1066 is well known. After defeating the Norwegians at Stamford Bridge, Harold turns south. News arrived that William of Normandy had landed on England's southern coast. According to this version, Harold and his army marched roughly 200 miles from north to south in just over a week. The journey was supposedly brutal, soldiers exhausted, supplies stretched thin, morale tested. By the time they reached Hastings, the English forces were believed to be physically drained and disadvantaged. This narrative has endured for generations, framing Harold as a heroic but doomed figure. It fits a cultural preference for admiring the brave loser. Yet, as compelling as the story is, it may not be accurate. Tom Lyson's research began with a simple question: was such a rapid and exhausting march even plausible? Historians long accepted the idea, but Lyson began to reconsider the logistics. Moving an entire army across such a distance in so little time would have been extraordinarily difficult. The physical strain alone could have crippled the army before it even reached its destination. The key to resolving this puzzle lay in the interpretation of historical texts, particularly the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This collection of annals, written by clerics in Old English, is a vital source for early medieval England. A crucial phrase refers to Harold's fleet being sent home. For generations, historians interpreted this as disbanded. But Lyson noticed something important. Home often referred specifically to London Herald's base of power. This reinterpretation changes everything. If home meant London, Harold's fleet was not dismissed, it was regrouped. Instead of abandoning his ships, Harold may have used them strategically to transport troops. Under Lyson's revised interpretation, the events of 1066 unfold quite differently. After defeating Harold Hardrada, Harold did not immediately force his army into a punishing overland march. Instead, he likely used his fleet to travel south along England's eastern coast. This would have been far faster and less taxing. England, at the time, possessed a capable seafaring tradition, with ships regularly traveling up and down the coastline. As Rory Naismith noted, there is ample evidence that such maritime movement was common during the period. By returning to London via ship, Harold could have given his troops time to rest and regroup. This would have allowed him to approach the looming conflict with William in a much stronger position. From London, Harold then moved south toward Hastings. But here again, the new interpretation adds another layer. While part of his army traveled overland, he may have also dispatched ships to the southern coast to outmaneuver William. Lyson suggests that Harold could have been planning a pincer movement, an advanced military tactic. If successful, this strategy might have trapped the Norman army between two English forces. However, the plan appears to have failed due to timing. The fleet either arrived too late or was unable to coordinate effectively. As a result, the decisive confrontation at Hastings still took place, but without the advantage Harold may have intended. Yet, this reinterpretation transforms our understanding of the Battle of Hastings itself. Instead of a weary, desperate army, Harold's forces may have been relatively well-rested and strategically organized. The outcome, therefore, cannot be explained simply by fatigue or poor preparation. Rather, the battle becomes a more balanced contest between two capable leaders. William's victory was not preordained, was earned through tactics, discipline, and perhaps a degree of luck, as License himself suggested. The result may have been something close to a coin toss. Under slightly different circumstances, it is entirely possible that Harold could have emerged victorious. This perspective restores a sense of contingency to history. Major events are not always inevitable. Another long-standing myth concerns Harold's death. Popular imagery shows the king struck in the eye by an arrow. However, historians have increasingly questioned its accuracy. Earlier sources suggest a different, more violent end. Harold may have been cut down by a group of Norman knights in close combat. Like the forced march, the arrow in the narrative may be more legend than fact. The persistence of the traditional story highlights an important truth about history. It is not just facts, but interpretations. During the Victorian era, historians often emphasized dramatic, moralizing narratives. The image of Harold as a noble but doomed hero fit perfectly within this framework. Over time, these interpretations hardened into accepted facts, rarely questioned. As Duncan Wright observed, such narratives can become deeply embedded in cultural identity. But modern scholarship encourages a more critical approach. By revisiting original sources, historians uncover new insights. The significance of 1066 cannot be overstated. The Norman conquest reshaped England's political structure, language, and culture. It marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the beginning of a new era under Norman leadership. As Naismith points out, it remains one of the few dates that nearly everyone recognizes a true watershed moment. Yet, the new research suggests that this turning point was not as one-sided as it has often been portrayed. Harold was not simply a victim of exhaustion or poor judgment. He may have been a capable and strategic leader. If that is the case, then the story of 1066 becomes even more compelling. Not as a tale of inevitable defeat, but as a dramatic and uncertain struggle between two rival claimants. The ongoing reassessment of the Battle of Hastings serves as a reminder that history is never truly finished. Even well-known events can yield new interpretations when examined with fresh eyes. Licensee's work represents part of a broader effort to refine our understanding of the past. It also underscores the importance of primary sources. Small details can have far-reaching consequences. In the end, the revised view of 1066 does not diminish the drama of Harold's fall, it enhances it. Instead of a tired king marching toward inevitable defeat, we see a leader making calculated decisions. Instead of a predetermined outcome, we see a moment of genuine uncertainty, where the fate of a nation hung in the balance. The Battle of Hastings remains one of the most important events in English history. But thanks to new research, it is no longer just a story of loss. It is a story of possibility, complexity, and inquiry. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that even the most familiar stories can still surprise us.
Between 1764 and 1767, a wave of terror swept through the rugged countryside of southern France in a region known as Gavaudan. Isolated villages, dense forests, and rolling hills formed a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving, a place where superstition and survival were deeply intertwined. It was here that a mysterious predator emerged, a creature that would come to be known as the Beast of Gavaudan. Its attacks were brutal, its behavior baffling, and its identity remains one of history's most enduring enigmas. The first recorded attack occurred in the summer of 1764. A young woman tending cattle near the village of Langone reported an encounter with a massive, wolf-like animal, according to her account. The beast charged at her but was driven away by her herd of cows. At the time, the incident seemed unusual but not entirely inexplicable. Wolves were known to roam the countryside, and attacks on livestock were common. However, what followed would quickly shatter any sense of normalcy within weeks. Reports began to surface of violent assaults on villagers, unlike typical wolf attacks. This creature appeared to deliberately hunt humans. Its victims were often women and children, individuals who worked alone in fields or traveled between villages. The killings were savage. Bodies were discovered mutilated, sometimes partially consumed, sometimes left in ways that suggested something more than simple predation. Fear spread rapidly, fueled by whispers and exaggerations that transformed the beast into something almost supernatural. Witness descriptions added to the mystery. Survivors and observers consistently described a creature larger than a typical wolf, with a long, narrow snout, reddish or tawny fur, and a dark stripe running along its back. Some claimed it had an unusually broad chest, powerful jaws, and a tail that ended in a tuft. Others insisted its movements were strange, almost feline rather than canine, and that it seemed unnaturally bold, showing little fear of humans or weapons. As the attacks increased, panic took hold across Gavaudan. Villagers began to travel in groups, children were kept indoors, and daily life was reshaped by the constant threat of violence. Churches filled with frightened worshippers seeking protection, while local authorities struggled to respond to a crisis that seemed to defy explanation. The French crown soon became involved. King Louis XV was informed of the situation, and what had begun as a regional problem escalated into a matter of national concern. The king dispatched professional hunters to the region, including experienced wolf hunters tasked with eliminating the threat. Among them was Jean-Charles de Neval, a renowned hunter from Normandy, who arrived with his son and a team of skilled trackers. Hunting the beast, however, proved far more difficult than anyone anticipated. The forests of Gavaudan were vast and treacherous, offering countless hiding places. Wolves were abundant in the region, and distinguishing the killer from ordinary animals was nearly impossible. Hunting parties organized large-scale drives, combing through the wilderness and killing dozens, sometimes hundreds of wolves. Yet the attacks continued. This persistence deepened the mystery. If the beast were simply a wolf, why did killing so many others have no effect? Some began to speculate that there might be more than one creature involved. Others believed the beast was something entirely different, perhaps a hybrid, a trained animal, or even a supernatural entity sent as punishment or omen. In 1765, the king sent his own royal gun-bearer, Francois Antoine, to take control of the hunt. Antoine was a seasoned marksman and a figure of considerable authority. After months of tracking, he killed a large wolf near the Abbey of Chazes. The animal was enormous, and its appearance seemed to match many of the descriptions provided by witnesses. It was declared the Beast of Gavaudan, and its body was preserved and sent to the royal court at Versailles. For a brief moment, it appeared that the nightmare was over. But the relief was short-lived. Within months, new attacks were reported. The killings resumed with the same ferocity as before, undermining the claim that the beast had been slain. Panic returned, perhaps even more intense than before, as the realization set in that the true predator was still at large, or that there had never been just one. Over the next 2 years, the people of Gavaudan endured continued terror. The death toll rose, with estimates suggesting that dozens, possibly over 100 people were killed. The exact number is difficult to determine, as records from the time were inconsistent and often influenced by fear and rumor. Nevertheless, the impact on the region was undeniable. Entire communities lived under constant threat, their routines dictated by the movements of an unseen enemy. The final chapter of the story began in 1767. A local hunter named Jean Chastel emerged as a central figure, unlike the royal hunters who had come and gone. Chastel was a resident of the region, familiar with its terrain and wildlife. According to accounts, he joined a hunting party organized by local authorities and eventually encountered the beast near Montmichet. The details of the encounter have taken on a legendary quality. Some stories claim that Chastel used silver bullets, blessed by a priest, to kill the creature, an element that has contributed to the mythic aura surrounding the event. While historians often dismiss this detail as folklore, it reflects the deep sense of fear and superstition that had developed around the beast. What is more certain is that Chastel did kill a large animal believed to be responsible for the attacks. After its death, the killings ceased. Unlike the earlier wolf killed by Francois Antoine, this creature was not sent to Versailles, and detailed records of its examination are scarce. As a result, its true nature was never definitively established. Was it a particularly large wolf? A wolf-dog hybrid? An exotic animal, such as a hyena or lion, that had somehow found its way to rural France? Or was it something else entirely, something shaped as much by fear and imagination as by physical reality? The mystery of the Beast of Gavaudan has endured for over 2 centuries, inspiring countless theories, books, and adaptations. Some researchers argue that the attacks can be explained by a series of unusually aggressive wolves, possibly driven by environmental pressures or habituation to human prey. Others suggest that a single, atypical animal, perhaps suffering from disease or raised in captivity, developed a pattern of hunting humans. More speculative theories venture into darker territory. Some have proposed that the beast was trained by a human, used as a weapon to terrorize the population. A few even suggest the involvement of a serial killer who used animal attacks as a cover for murder. While these ideas remain controversial and largely unsupported by concrete evidence, they highlight the complexity of the case and the difficulty of separating fact from legend. What makes the story of the Beast of Gavaudan so compelling is not just the violence of the attacks, but the uncertainty that surrounds them. Unlike many historical events, there is no clear resolution. No definitive answer that ties together all the details. Instead, the case exists as a blend of documented history and evolving folklore, shaped by the fears and beliefs of those who lived through it. In many ways, the beast reflects the anxieties of its time. 18th century rural France was a place where the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural were often blurred. Scientific understanding of animal behavior was limited, and unexplained events were frequently interpreted through the lens of religion or superstition. The idea of a monstrous creature stalking the countryside was not just plausible, it was almost expected. Yet even with modern knowledge, the mystery remains difficult to unravel. While it is tempting to dismiss the beast as nothing more than a series of wolf attacks exaggerated by fear, the consistency of certain details, its apparent size, its focus on human victims, its resilience despite extensive hunting suggests that something unusual was indeed at play. The legacy of the Beast of Gavaudan continues to captivate the imagination. It has been the subject of films, literature, and historical investigations, each attempting to reconstruct the events and uncover the truth. But perhaps its enduring power lies in its ambiguity. The beast is not just a creature, it is a question, one that challenges our understanding of history, nature, and the stories we tell to make sense of both. In the end, the terror that gripped Gavaudan faded, but the mystery did not. The forests grew quiet once more, the villages returned to their routines, and the memory of the beast became part of local legend. Yet the question remains, echoing through time. What was the Beast of Gavaudan? A wolf? A monster? Or something that exists only in the space between reality and fear? No one has ever proven the answer, and perhaps that is why this story endures, because some mysteries refuse to be solved, lingering instead as shadows in the history of human experience.
A fossilized skull and jawbones found in Niger belonged to a creature that had a large, bony crest atop its head and lived some 95 million years ago. Named Spinosaurus mirabilis, it is the first species of Spinosaurus to be identified in more than a century. The findings, which published February 19th in the journal Science, suggest that the prehistoric creature is a close relative of Spinosaurus aegyptiosus, a giant fish-eating dinosaur with a sail across its back. First described in 1915 by German paleontologist Ahrenstromer von Reichenbach, this discovery may answer a long-debated question among scientists about Spinosaurus species. Were they marine pursuit predators, animals that dove and swam after prey? Or were they more like herons, waiting at the shoreline and strategically striking fish in shallow water? Paul Sereno, lead author of the study and professor of organismal biology and anatomy at the University of Chicago, said the new research points to Spinosaurus being what he calls a hell heron, A semi-aquatic shoreline hunter with physical similarities to a wading bird, but at a terrifying scale. According to the newly identified fossils, the creature likely had a long, narrow snout for snaring fish, a neck that could drive the head down in a stabbing motion, and legs long enough to hunt in shallow water. When researchers compared head, neck, and hind limb proportions of the fossilized bones to an adult blue heron, the similarities suggested that Spinosaurus was adapted for stalking and striking along open shorelines and river edges. But the smoking gun, Sereno said, was that the fossils were found very far inland, suggesting that the creature lived and hunted along river systems and other shallow waterways, rather than the sea. Finding a giant, marine-adapted predator in the middle of the continent, he said, would be as unlikely as finding a blue whale in Chicago. A unique headpiece like Spinosaurus aegyptius, Spinosaurus mirabilis, had a bony crest on its head. But in S. mirabilis, the structure was more pronounced and dramatic compared to its relatives. It's a flamboyant crest of bone jutting off of its head, like the quiff hairstyle of Elvis. Steve Broussat, a paleontologist at the University of Edinburgh, said in an email. He was not involved in the study. It's a very bad weapon, Sereno said of the creature's head crest. It's awkwardly positioned, somewhat fragile and asymmetrical. All traits that point away from its use in combat and toward display and signaling, maybe even sexual signaling, he added. The difference in the head crests of the newly identified fossils and other Spinosaurus remains helped researchers confirm that it was a distinct species within the Spinosaurus genus. Compared to Spinosaurus Spinosaurus mirabilis also had a lower set jaw and interlocking teeth. A configuration, Sereno said, is well suited for gripping slippery fish. A renaissance in giant predatory dinosaur research. The study also sheds light on the evolution of spinosaurs, which may have unfolded in three phases. During the Jurassic, its fish-snaring skull emerged. In the early Cretaceous, Spinosaurus became a dominant predator around the ancient Tethys Sea. And just before the late Cretaceous, as the Atlantic Ocean opened, Spinosaurus reached its largest sizes and became a shallow-water ambush specialist. In North Africa and South America, it has long been a mysterious dinosaur. But with each new fossil, find the real Spinosaurus is slowly coming into focus, Broussat said. Sereno emphasized how modern tools accelerated the research. The team took hundreds of photos and created 3D models of Smyrabilis, allowing researchers to digitally manipulate the crest and jaw fragments and begin reconstructing the skull. The new fossil find represents a renaissance in giant predatory dinosaur research. Matteo Fabbri, assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine's Center for Functional Anatomy and Evolution, said via email. Fabbri was not involved in the research, but he also noted that it is hard to establish a new species from fossil fragments. The fragmentary nature of the fossils does not provide much to work with, leaving many doubts regarding the actual anatomy of the animal, he said. A replica of the Spinosaurus skull is on display at Chicago's Children's Museum, providing kids with an opportunity to see it. For Sereno, the fossils are not just a major scientific find, but an invitation for the next generation to engage with the wonder of discovery.
Imagine spending 20 years piece by tiny piece assembling a puzzle that's 3.67 million years old. That's not just a puzzle, it's the story of one of our most ancient relatives. A story painstakingly brought to light from the depths of a South African cave. This is the incredible journey of Littlefoot. Our story begins in 1994. Paleoanthropologist Ron Clark was sorting through boxers of fossil fragments from the Sterfontein Caves, a place often called the cradle of humankind. Among the jumble of animal bones, he spotted something extraordinary for small foot bones. They were unmistakably hominin, an early human ancestor. But unlike other finds, these bones fit together perfectly. He nicknamed the individual Littlefoot. Clark was convinced the rest of the skeleton was still embedded in the rock, deep within the cave. Most of his colleagues were skeptical. Finding a few bones was one thing, but locating an entire skeleton that had been lost to time for millions of years, it seemed impossible. But Clark had a hunch. He created a plaster cast of the broken edge of one of the bones and gave it to his assistants, Stephen Motsumi and Inquain Mulf. Their mission to go back into the vast, dark labyrinth of the Sturkfontein caves and find the other half of that break. For 2.5 years, they searched. Armed with handheld lamps, they scanned the cave walls and ceiling, a seemingly endless expanse of ancient rock. Then, in 1997, the impossible happened. One of them spotted a clean break in a rock high up on the cavern wall. He pulled out the cast. It was a perfect match. The rest of Littlefoot was there, waiting. What followed was an excavation unlike any other. The skeleton was encased in breccia, a rock as hard as concrete. Using power tools would have shattered their delicate fossils. So Clark and his team had to use tiny, handheld tools more suited for dentists than for excavating in a dark, damp cave. For 2 decades, they meticulously chipped away at the rock, millimeter by millimeter, revealing the skeleton one piece at a time. It was slow, painstaking, and often frustrating work, but they were uncovering a treasure. What emerged from the stone was breathtaking. Littlefoot was over 90% complete, a level of preservation unheard of for a fossil of this age. We had skulls, we had limbs, but never had we found a single individual so whole. This wasn't just a collection of fragments. It was a person frozen in time. The skeleton belonged to an Australopithecus, an elderly female who had fallen through a sinkhole into the cave millions of years ago. The completeness of the skeleton allows us to answer questions we could only speculate about before. How did our early ancestors move? Littlefoot's legs were longer than her arms, suggesting she was much more comfortable walking upright on 2 legs than her ape-like relatives. This was a crucial step on the evolutionary road to becoming human, her shoulder joints. However, tell a different story. They were structured in a way that suggests she was also an adept climber, spending significant time in the trees, likely for safety or to find food. She was a creature of 2 worlds, at home on the ground but still connected to an arboreal past. This combination of traits challenges simpler ideas of how we evolved. The skull of Littlefoot is another marvel. It's the most complete Australopithecus skull ever found. Inside, the imprints of blood vessels and brain structures are preserved, giving us a glimpse into the neurobiology of our ancient cousins. Her teeth show a diet that included tough plants, fruits, and seeds, painting a picture of her daily life and the environment she inhabited. Dating Littlefoot was another epic scientific saga. Initial estimates varied wildly, but a groundbreaking technique called cosmogenic nuclide dating, which analyzes the radioactive decay of elements within the rocks surrounding the fossil, finally gave us a firm answer. Littlefoot lived 3.67 million years ago, making her one of the earliest known hominins from South Africa and a contemporary of the famous Lucy fossil from Ethiopia. This new date is crucial. It means that different species of Australopithecus were living across Africa at the same time, each adapting to their local environment. The story of human evolution wasn't a single, linear march of progress. It was a bushy, diverse tree of life, with many different branches coexisting, and only 1 hours surviving to the present day. After 20 years of excavation, the cleaning and reconstruction began. Each AIV, over 150 bones, had to be carefully cleaned, pieced together, and studied. It's a 3D jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box. In 2017, the world finally saw the results of this incredible dedication. The fully assembled skeleton of Littlefoot was unveiled, a silent testament to a life lived millions of years ago. Looking at her, we see ourselves in a distant mirror. We see the beginnings of the upright posture that allows us to walk across the planet. We see the adaptability that allowed our lineage to survive and thrive. Littlefoot isn't just a collection of bones. She's a tangible link to our deepest past, a reminder that our own story is written in the very rocks of the earth. The 20-year journey to bring her into the light was more than just a scientific project. It was an act of recovery, reuniting us with a long-lost member of our ancient family. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into our past. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the history of our world. See you next time.
What was on the menu for Stone Age cooks? The results are surprising. European hunter-gatherers were far more advanced in their cooking methods than previously thought. A new study has found combining ingredients in remarkably selective ways, with cuisines even varying by region. Researchers analyzed the burnt remains of food stuck to the side of pots, called food crusts, and found that Stone Age cooks used a range of plant and animal products to create meals. The team's findings, published Wednesday in the journal PLOS ONE, provide new insights into the diets of Europeans who lived between 5,000 and 8,000 years ago. Researchers analyzed 85 pottery sherds, of which 58 had identifiable fragments of plants. The pottery came from 13 sites, spanning from modern-day Denmark to what is now Ivanovo Oblast in eastern Russia. The team first found plant remnants in the food crust and then, using microscopes, looked for samples that were well preserved enough that they were able to identify the plants through their cell structure. The initial research revealed some plants that had been used, so the team cooked some of the recipes. Oliver Craig, a co-author of the study and a professor of archaeological science at the University of Leeds, England, told CNN they combined carp and viburnum berries, and oak leaf goosefoot and beet, and cooked them in replica clay pots over a fire. This gave them new samples with which to compare the ancient food crusts. The standard narrative around hunter-gatherers was that they were just putting stuff in the fire, said Craig. Most analyzers of hunter-gatherer diets focused on the fatty residue left on cookware and the bones of slaughtered animals. Craig said, meaning researchers knew a lot about the hunters, but little about the gatherers. Lead study author Laura Gonzalez Carretero simply looked where no one else had. Craig said, the new study shows that Stone Age people had sophisticated ways of cooking foods, he said, and that they were remarkably selective in which foods they cooked. These hunter-gatherers had deep knowledge of all the roots, tubers, fruits, and berries that were available to them, Craig said. But when the team analyzed what was in the pot, they only found a limited variety. We're only finding a few things that are being picked out, perhaps because they taste nice or they go well with other foods, Craig said. Regional cuisine is not every region had the same tastes. Despite ingredients being available across Europe, the study found that there were distinct preparations in certain regions. A combination of freshwater fish and wild grass was particularly popular near the border of Ukraine and Russia, whilst further east, in central modern-day Russia, they seemed to prefer amaranth plants with their fish. Danish hunter-gatherers also liked amaranth, though they favored the plant's flowers. It is a conscious choice, Craig said. Some of these trends have carried over to the modern day, researchers said. Viburnum berries, also known as Gelder rose berries, which were found in multiple samples, are still eaten across Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. The idea that Stone Age people relied on hunting is fundamentally wrong, said Mark Robinson, an associate professor of archaeology at the University of Exeter, England, who was not involved in the study. Instead, research now suggests that they had a sophisticated approach to using plants. Robinson told CNN, despite some of the ingredients identified in the pots still being used today, Robinson pointed out that we still know remarkably little about how foods were combined into meals or how culinary traditions and recipes developed over time.